And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposal. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here, back with another AFL round review. And for those watching the YouTube channel, you will see a couple of new faces hopping on the podcast. I must introduce these two fellas because these two are fantastic for the game of footy over here in the States. We have two of the founding members of the University of Cincinnati footy team. We have Kyle Bavis and we have PJ both joining us today. Kyle, great to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for having us on the podcast.
Awesome, awesome. And PJ as well, great to meet you and have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Awesome, awesome. I had to have these two fellas on. I had the honor of listening to them on a mutual friend of ours, the Yank on the Footy podcast. And I reached out to them after and was like, hey guys, I'd love to have you on the podcast, have you talk AFL because I love having fellow Americans to be able to talk with. As much as I love my Aussie friends, as much as I love their banter, I want sometimes to be able to give this opportunity for Americans to hop on the podcast. So really quickly, fellas, either of you on this one, how did you guys get the University of Cincinnati footy team really quick before we hop into the AFL footy we're about to talk about?
Sure. So me and PJ both went Cincinnati Dockers last year, and it was kind of me that pitched the idea, and PJ came along. Has been absolutely huge help. Basically, we thought, okay, so there was the Ohio Valley River Rats, and then Cincinnati decided starting this year to be their own senior team. And so the question was for, what would we do for Metro? And I said, well, why don't we have one of our two Metro teams be the University of Cincinnati? We have over 50,000 students that currently attend. And it's a way to grow the game at the, 18 to 22-year-old level.
Fantastic. And I love that you're being able to do that. So, and I'm hoping so. How are numbers looking, and how's it going on campus? Is it something that people are talking about?
Sure, you can answer that one, PJ, if you'd like.
Yeah, numbers have been good. It's such a big campus that it is a little bit hard to get the word around to the general body. But we had probably 15, maybe 16 for our last game against the Dockers, which was only, I don't know, 3 months after we got approved as a club. So we've been growing pretty fast. It's mostly stayed within our own circles. The vast majority of the team are just my friends, a couple guys who are already playing. So that's our big push for next season is to get out of that. But I would say for the beginning, we've got a really solid group of guys, probably 15 to 18 total already.
Yeah, you guys are doing fantastic. I love hearing that the sport is spreading. It's always so much fun. So I gotta ask, have you guys had the question, is it rugby yet?
All the time.
Every time.
All the
I
time.
I joke with many on the podcast. I said almost most of the time when I get somebody that they see my hat, like I'm wearing my Roosters hat around, they go, is that rugby? And and my favorite response is, did I say rugby if I've introduced it to them? And I don't mean it condescendingly, but it is the most hilarious thing when it hops into it. So now that we've kind of introduced our co-host, let's hop right into it. AFL round 15 has come. It has gone. The bye rounds finally are gone. We get 9 games of footy from now on the rest of the year, gentlemen. So we had 6 games this round and a little bit of everything, some excitement, some blowouts, some controversy, all of that. So, Kyle, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on round 15 as a whole?
I thought it was interesting overall. Nothing really jumped out as too crazy. Obviously, we had the Battle of Sydney a couple days ago, which overall I think was pretty exciting, albeit, still a 27-point differential in the score. Other than that, not a whole lot to report. I'll tell you what, North Melbourne, despite having a really poor start to the season, I think they start off 0-11, I believe. They've really kind of turned the tide. And I mean, yeah, they lost this past weekend, but only to 3 points to, the Melbourne FC. So not too bad. And other than that, not too many surprises. Unfortunately, my team, the Gold Coast Suns, lost by 20 to PJ's team. But it's all right. They played all right. It's just unfortunate. The Suns really got to do some soul searching on why they can't seem to win on the road. I don't know if it's lack of preparation or if it's just a young team or if it's just bad luck. But either way, the Suns really do have to do some soul searching on that.
Awesome, PJ. So you get the first ever cup win between the two of you.
Yes.
Awesome. Your thoughts, PJ, on this round?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a little bit of everything, right? Some blowouts, controversy, close games. For me as a Frio fan, of course they found a way to make what was a pretty decent win, way more nerve-wracking than it should have been. Had the game on replay, and they were up by I think almost 40-30 at one point. And I started to put the phone down, get on with my day. And I mean, I look back and the Suns are within 15. And I'm like, what's going on here, guys? Right? Fortunately, they found a way to stick it through, which honestly, for this team might have been the best outcome, right? They've had a couple of, blown leads and stuff like that this season. And so to have a game where, should have been a little more of a complete game, but, they were able to hold that lead even when it was going against them. I think that was really good for them.
Fantastic. Let's go through it. Like I said, 6 games to go through. And the one theme that I tend to notice a lot is just like the first game, is we get a little bit of a blowout as we go to the MCG as Carlton blow out the Cats by 63, 138-75. I mean, yeah, it's hard not to say this right now. We'll go to you, PJ, on this with Carlton. I mean, they're starting to look like the one team that may be able to challenge Sydney for the flag this year.
Yeah, I mean, as a Frio fan, Carlton aren't always my favorite team, but I mean, just like you said, they look like a complete team. I mean, just to put up that dominant of a performance in all aspects of the game was really impressive. I really only ended up catching, I think, the second half of this game. That's really, especially at the end there, that's where they started to sort of really pull the game away. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I think they're probably one of few, if the only team that's going to challenge at the top this season.
Definitely. Kyle, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. First off, just on a fun note, their jerseys were very interesting this past weekend. I think they were going retro with the orange and blue, which as an FC Cincinnati fan, obviously I'm a fan of the orange and blue, but to call yourself the Carlton Blues and have orange in them, it kind of has almost a Greater Western Sydney look. But putting that aside, yeah, I mean, obviously they got the 63-point win. Couple of things to take away from it is they got 34 hitouts, 25 disposals, and 20 contested possessions. So overall, it was just a very one-sided affair. Obviously, as we all know, when teams play at home in the AFL, they have a tremendous advantage. Although the thing with Geelong, they have a little bit less than an hour drive, and they play a few games. I believe it's at Marvel, maybe MCG. So yes, Carlton had that home field advantage, but nevertheless, I think it really speaks volumes to what Carlton's been able to put together this year, especially if they're arch rival winning the flag this past year. And yeah, I mean, the Cats, not a bad team as well. Obviously about middle of the table this year, but still a very, very strong statement win from Carlton.
Yeah, I think with me though, that with the Cats they're getting their midfield is getting exposed a little bit because of the injury issues they've had. Yes, they had Danger back this game, but again, first game back sometimes is going to be a little bit rough. There's going to be some growing pains, and this was one of Carlton's most complete games. Cripps looked good, Walsh looked good. The big two up forward and Kerno and Mackay look good. Wiedering looked fantastic. Saad's finally back from his injury issues that he's fighting back. This is still a Carlton team. They're not 100% healthy. There's still a few still to come back into this side. You still have Chera, you still have Kennedy. So this is a Blues team that still could get even a little bit stronger again. I think the Cats, what they're running into is that lack of depth in the midfield, and it's exposing them defensively. I think Tom Stewart this year is starting to look a little bit more human, as teams have started to kind of figure out the tagging role on him. So it'll be definitely fascinating to see how the Cats go, because unfortunately, it looks like Hawkins could be done for the season if this injury is as bad as some think it could be, and could even be career ending, which would be sad for the big man because he's been such a stalwart for the Geelong Cats. Let's jump over to the Adelaide Oval, where an embarrassing performance sees a very hostile Port Adelaide as the Brisbane Lions come in and layeth the smackdown 152-73, a 79-point win by the Lions. And everything everybody wants to talk about is how abysmal Port Adelaide played in this one, that even the coach gets booed off the field by the home Ferals. Kyle, will go to you. This has got to be tough for Port Adelaide because everybody was talking. They made their moves in the offseason to be a finals team, and the performances are just not there.
Yeah, well, to note, I said there wasn't any real surprise upsets, and I'll stick to it on this one. I mean, Brisbane are a much more complete team than they put out. They've been complete for many years. Obviously, they had a slow start this year, but they competed for the flag. I mean, they were almost won the grand final this past year. And of course, Brisbane heading over to Adelaide, pretty long distance there. And certainly Port Adelaide definitely could have played a better, more complete game. But I think definitely Brisbane Lions. And it hurts me, being a fan of both his sons, the biggest rival, but I think the Brisbane Lions are probably the biggest sleeper. And I'll make a prediction that they'll probably sneak into the top 8 by the end of the year, even though I know they're currently a little bit out of the top 8 at the moment.
PJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to be able to say like, hey, I thought Brisbane were going to win, but I didn't. I thought this was going to be a close game personally. And like you said, they had those acquisitions in the offseason, but they just don't seem to click at all. Like, I don't even think they were bad moves necessarily, especially looking back at it, but it just like coaching, not sure what it is, but they're not clicking. I mean, my big takeaway from this one was just how good Lockie Neal is. I mean, he was fantastic. I mean, I'll pull up the stats, but I don't even think he scored at all. And yet, I mean, when you have those big blowout wins like that, I think probably the most underrated part of those wins is the ability to continue to move the ball, right? You're
Mhm.
not getting stopped in the midfield, right? Any press or not they're doing isn't working. And that was all because of him. I mean, he had Lord knows how many disposals and really, really good moving that ball down the field.
Yeah, 100% with you. And you are really good if you can win 2 Brownlow medals or 2 basically MVPs, as many
Yeah,
would say over
exactly.
here in the States. So you don't win those by fluke, you win those by skill. So this Brisbane Lions team is very, very good. They've really got a good depth of talent. And for me, with Port Adelaide's additions, Zerk Thatcher and Radically are good, but they weren't like great. They're good players, but they're not great, and they just haven't clicked with Alir Alir, because I think Asava Radikalir and Alir Alir are really much the same. So it's who's going to be the intercept marker, who's going to be the key defender. And I think that's been the issue that Port Adelaide's run into. And it throws a lot of questions. Does Ken Hinkley see next season, or will he find himself with a pink slip at the end of the year? It'll definitely be interesting to see what the Port Adelaide brass decide to do going further. We'll jump to the Battle of the Bridge, the Sydney Derby, whatever the hell you want to call it. For most of my friends that I know of in Sydney, it is the Sydney Derby, as the Swans go into NG Stadium, into hostile territory in NG Stadium, and get a 102-75 win. But I'll say this right now, for most that watched this game, this was probably a 4 or 5 goal. This was probably a 5 or 6 goal win. And Sydney kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit late in the fourth quarter. GWS fought back to kind of make the scoreboard flatter them a little bit. But in the long run, the Swans just too good, just too deep. Last week, Joel Armati kicks 9. This week, 11 different goal scorers. So this one's again looking ominous to everybody in the competition. PJ, quickly on this, Swans looking so good. But this is a GWS Giants team that, if we look at how the season started, what's happened to this once lauded team?
Yeah, I mean, you stole my headline from this one, which is all the different goal scorers, and I honestly think that's what GBS struggled with was being able to shut down that many different options. But I mean, like you said, they've just kind of come apart. I thought this game was going to be a little bit closer, but I think the Swans just showed like how good they are just compared to the rest of the competition this year. They seem practically unbeatable. Um, I mean, I had the game on in the beginning, but it was really that second quarter. I mean, they just lost it. They were all over the place. They weren't getting second balls. They weren't able to move up the field at all. Um, they didn't look complete. And like you said, I mean, it could have been another one of those big blowout games. But credit to GWS. They kept their head in and were able to bring it back just a little bit to a scoreline that was more respectable.
Definitely. Kyle, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Sydney Swans are just simply in a league of their own this year. Obviously, anytime you have a in-city rivalry, you're prone to upsets because tempers run high, emotions run high as well. And teams that maybe are higher up in the standings or just overall have higher quality can sometimes let the emotions get the best of them. But in this case, it's Sydney versus really Canberra. So Sydney's the true team there, is I think you would agree, and they proved that they're the best team in Sydney and probably in the entire competition.
Just real quick for you, Kyle, for some of my friends that are over in Australia, it's Canberra.
Canberra. Sorry.
Canberra. It's fine. It's not a problem. I've had it happen all the time. I know I have a few friends that always chat with me because they love that I've listened to so many Aussie podcasts and everything like that. So when you do talk to an Australian, make sure you call it Melbourne, not Melbourne.
Mhm.
Melbourne, like Burn. Almost get rid of the O. So just for further heads up when you talk with Australians, Melbourne. So not an issue. Not trying to give you the
You're fine.
pronunciation lesson, but I thought it'll help you out going further. So,
Yeah.
and we'll jump from that which as the Swan supporter, that game scared me. This GWS game scared me. They found a way to get it done. I'm happy about it. There's still again long season. I'm not gonna pop the champagne bottles yet because again I've seen seasons fall apart, and this Sydney Swans team is there's still some things to learn on that one, so it'll be interesting going forward. We have to go to it. The next one is the game of the round as North Melbourne just fall short to Melbourne 67-70. And North Melbourne go on a run, kicking 5 goals in the final quarter, holding Melbourne to no points at all in the final quarter, falling just a bit short. I think if you put one more minute on the clock, North Melbourne wins this game. To you, PJ, I know we kind of talked about it earlier. North Melbourne struggling at the start of the season. They get the win over West Coast, and they've looked very good ever since, falling just short to an amazing comeback to Collingwood this week, and almost pulling an amazing comeback against a Melbourne team that many people still fancy as a strong finals contender.
Yeah. I mean, you said it. I think the big thing for them has just been consistency, right? There's been times since I started watching the sport a little less than 10 years ago where, they've had some quality, they've had some ability, but they've never had the consistency. And even in this loss, you're starting to see a little bit more consistency, right? You're not going to win every quarter, but they're showing that for the first time in a while, they can actually compete over the entire course of a game, which I think is massive for them. I mean, like that comeback was going to be nothing short of miraculous if it happened. I was pulling for it. Personally, would have made the Dockers a little more breathing room up there in the top eight. But yeah, I mean for them, it's just the consistency, being able to actually compete at a top level throughout all 4 quarters.
Definitely. Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think North Melbourne Kangaroos are kind of an interesting place in their franchise. Um, Obviously they're bottom of the table. They are showing some promising signs, but I think the biggest thing that North Melbourne really needs to focus on is starting from the ground up and really starting a rebuild. I like, and I'll bring it up from a few years ago, that they, had that Arden Street redevelopment. I think it really helps, especially to reach out to the northern part of Victoria to try to regrow their franchise. But with that all being said, obviously the much bigger thing we need to look at, because North Melbourne is not going to be relevant come the end of the season, is Melbourne Demons. They are, high quality team. Fell off a little bit at the end of the year, very similar to the Brisbane Lions, but obviously they're getting the wins. They got one, although albeit they shouldn't have only won by 3 points and fought to the death with the worst team in the league. But I think if Melbourne just continues on cranking out these couple point wins, hopefully they'll be able to creep into the top eight, maybe even the top four by the end of the year. And once you're in the playoffs, who knows?
Definitely, for sure. That I think the loss of Christian Petrarca is going to be one to keep an eye on because I remember tipping North Melbourne in this game. I took the risk. I could see how it possibly, and it almost turned out for me on this one. I was super in barrack mode, barracking for North Melbourne in this one again. The D's, they're solid. They're going to be good defensively. My worry is them going forward and how they replace Christian Petrarca. Trent Rivers did a fantastic job in this game. He looks like he could be the heir apparent to Petrarca's spot there, but it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. North's gonna shape the finals. They're going to shape the finals. They're going to knock somebody off. They're going to find somebody on their day. They're going to knock them off, and it's going to throw everything out of whack. And I mean, this ladder's already tight. It's going to get even tighter if North Melbourne starts knocking off these teams like the Brisbane Lions, like Gold Coast, like Fremantle. Again, not specifically going at your guys' teams, but you're in that gap
Yes,
in that in
absolutely.
the in that ladder section where I mean, one loss could make or break you. It is so intriguing to see this season again. I know everybody's like, well, look at Sydney. They got that 3 game gap. Yes, but everything from 2 to 13, there's only about a 2 game gap. So anything can happen the way this season is going. I cannot wait to watch this. It is going to be intriguing, these last 9 rounds of the season. Well, jump to Marvel Stadium as Essendon Bombers. Little shaky at times. West Coast definitely pushed them, but they've push it out to get a 5-goal win, 122-92. And Jake Stringer pulling a usual, the package as he is called, playing well when he needs a new contract. So I have to laugh at that one a little bit. Your thoughts on this, Kyle?
I think it had a very similar feel to the Melbourne versus North Melbourne game, albeit obviously a wider range in the score. There's a little bit of me, and I think PJ as well, that has a soft spot in our hearts for Essendon, considering our UC's punter, Mason Fletcher's father, played 23 years for Essendon.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit as a UC fan there. But outside of that, it obviously it was a closer game than many were expecting. Nate Caddy provided a spark inside 50 for Essendon. Aggressive leap and 2 goals coming from just a second game. So I thought that was definitely a spotlight to put on there. But outside of that, just overall pretty run-of-the-mill game. Obviously, Essendon is in the top 4 still competing. I mean, they'll probably be at the number 2 or number 3 spot because I don't think anyone's usurping Sydney Swans. But nevertheless, I think they have to do a similar thing to Melbourne FC and kind of address the fact that they did not look dominant against one of the bottom 3 teams in the league. But nevertheless, they still got the win and can carry on as one of the top few teams in the league.
And their schedule is definitely very convenient for them to have a good shot of being a top 4 side for sure. PJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, always love to see West Coast lose, even if it makes it maybe a little more
He's
difficult for
already
Frio.
grabbed it. He's already grabbed the West Coast, the WA Derby. I love it.
But yeah, I mean, this one, I sat down and watched pretty much the full game. Not too much to say, except one thing I noticed, and I'm sure they were talking about in the post-game show, is that West Coast I wouldn't say completely dominated, but controlled the stoppages, right? They were usually getting the ball
Mhm.
out from there, but they couldn't score. I mean, they probably had more total scores, but they weren't converting those into goals. And when you lose by like when you're winning those pretty handily and you're getting good chances off and you're not scoring, that's how you lose by 30 instead of like Kyle said, making it a little bit closer like that Kangaroos game was.
Mhm.
Right. I think that was probably the big difference here. It was a genuinely a similar feel. I honestly think that's what stopped them from coming back.
Yeah, definitely. I'm 100% with you. Yeah, Oscar Allen coming back. I think he was a little, you tell he was a little rusty early in the game. I don't think Jake Waterman had as good a game as he did. Still didn't do a bad job. But again, I think with those two, I think they're almost looking at them potentially being that Colonel Mackay matchup like Carlton has over the next couple of years. So it'll be definitely fascinating to watch this Eagles side. Again, Harley Reid should be back next week. So we'll have to see how this Eagles team progressed. They're not playing like the witches hat that they were last year when they gave up 200 points to Sydney. So there's definitely some positives now out west for the West Coast Eagles. And we jump to it, what I would almost call my co-host cup, as the Fremantle Dockers at home at Optus Stadium knock off the Gold Coast Suns 85-65, a 20-point win. But as you said, Kyle, Gold Coast started off really well. They jumped to an early lead. The Dockers kind of battled back, took the lead, and never really did relinquish it. And again, the Gold Coast travel woes continue, as again, they cannot win outside of the Queensland borders. PJ, as the victor in this particular winning, how good was it for you, and how happy is you that your Dockers are hopefully maybe trying to find some form as we push closer and closer to finals?
I mean, I've been saying the word all day and it's consistency, and I mean, they finally showed a little consistency. I was nervous to say the least going into this game. I mean, Gold Coast are a good team at the beginning of the season, right? People were saying this could be their season to really push for it. This could be their season, and it still could be, right? They do have a lot of issues, but they are still a good team overall. And to beat a team that, honestly, at the end of the season, we will probably be competing for a final spot for is massive. Um, and I actually saw some good things from Frio in this match. When we started to build that lead in the second and in the third, we were really smothering the ball. I thought that was great. We weren't letting them get any chances. We kept the ball in front of us and we moved the ball really well. Our disposals were great. We had very few turnovers in the second and the third. I think this is a really good game for Frio to build off of in terms of consistency and in terms of competing and showing a little bit more class and a little bit more ability than the other teams around us at the standings right now.
And Kyle, your thoughts? I know tough loss, but again, some positive things for Gold Coast. They're still a young side learning how to win under Dema Hardwick.
That's the victor comes the gloating. But I thought there were some definite positives to take away. Matty Rao, honestly, the Gold Coast live and die by Matty Rao in the midfield. When he's able to control possession and get it to out to the wingers, Gold Coast wins. When they get double teamed or stopped in the midfield, things don't go our way. I think the Gold Coast. Hopefully, if I was Gold Coast Suns head coach, I'd want to make the grand finals this year. But I think they still have a few pieces, hopefully between drafting and prospects, to make a actual run at a title. Because they just don't have the pieces going into the game. Like you said, Gold Coast obviously were able to go out to an early lead about halfway through the first quarter before obviously Frio came storming back. And overall, I think it just became too much of a contest for Gold Coast. They've had a couple of statement wins, but also just a couple of losses that wish we could have had back. And yeah, overall, like you mentioned, Gold Coast has a real problem on the road. I don't think they've won a single game on the road, and you're just not going to be successful as a team organization, any sport, if you are that anemic to scoring and winning on the road.
I mean, you can win those games at one, but you got to steal a few on the road to be able to make finals. And I've heard the adage that 13 wins usually get you into finals. So you can win all your home games, but then you still got to steal 2 on the road for you to make finals. So again, wasn't one of those people that was sitting here saying Gold Coast is going to make finals this year. I thought this was going to be a building year. I think they're ahead of schedule, if I'm being honest with you. I think they're ahead of schedule under Dema Hardwick. I still think there are a few things. You still need the full infusion of this last rookie class that you have. I think Rogers, Walter, Graham, and all them, they're coming in, but it's taking them a little bit of time, which is perfectly fine for a young class to do. So again, a lot of positives up in the Gold Coast. I think Dema Hardwick has got something. Let's see how quickly he progresses. Plus, not an easy matchup this week. We'll discuss that a little bit later on in the podcast, but I think this week will be a definitely tester. Can they maintain the record at home with who's coming to town this particular round? So we jump to the burning question section of the podcast. I have a few questions I want to ask you guys here. I've put this a little bit more towards towards you guys this year, because this particular section, because I want to have a little bit of fun with this. I know people in Australia, I've listened to tons of podcasts, that they're all angry because there's no Thursday night footy, and for us it's Thursday super early morning footy. As footy fans over here in the States, do you like having Thursday night footy, or do you not mind them going back to just Friday, Saturday, Sunday footy? Kyle, we'll start with you. Do you like Thursday night footy?
I do, and here's why. I mean, ideally, and obviously, you're not going to do this because then you lose demand because you got to have days where there's no games in order to have emphasis on the days that there are games. But nevertheless, having that one game on Thursday, I turn on, watch AFL, and there's the game, choose it, and there's not much thinking to go through. Right. Whereas when all the games are booked on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I still probably only have the time to maybe watch one game. So what I usually do is I fast forward to halfway. If it's competitive, I'll keep it on. If not, I'll switch to the next. But with that Thursday game, I think having that game alone on its own, sort of like how the NFL does Thursday night football, and they've take a step back with the NFL on Thursday night football. It used to be the really bad game. Now, bought by Amazon Prime, it's become a half decent game. And I think having that highlight day where there's just one game on, whether it's AFL or NFL, I think it really helps to make that kind of a staple focused game as well as kick off the week. So I'm in favor of them bringing it back.
All right, PJ, your thoughts on Thursday night footy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll ditto what Kyle said, but just personally and selfishly, I like having it. It makes it much easier for me to catch more games, right? Because when you just have these Friday, Saturday games, Sunday too, it's just like, you know, I probably have time to turn on a game, but by the time it gets to like Sunday afternoon over here, and I finally have a little bit of time to turn on a game, I've already seen most of the scores scrolling through Instagram or just talking to my friends from Australia. At that point, I don't want to watch the game at that point. Like I can usually make time in my schedule to watch the Frio game, just watch a replay of it, maybe one other. But having that early game is really nice because I can put it on the next day, or just even later in the day, something like that. So yes, I am selfishly big fan of Thursday night.
I like it because it spreads things out a little bit because these next couple of rounds, the thing that always irks me off is when there's two games on at the same time and I have to choose because there've been a couple of times this season and I've mentioned it on the podcast. There's two games. I want to watch them both, but I really don't want to double screen myself because it's fun enough trying to keep track of one. But when there's two and I'm trying to keep involved because it's a really good game, that's frustrating when I'm double screened. So I like the Thursday night footy. I'm kind of sad that the AFL is not going to do any Thursday night footy the rest of the home and away season, which kind of stinks. It makes Friday nights for us and Saturday nights for us long because there's five games over the span of 6 hours. It seems like it's just absolutely insane. So I'm 100% with you. I want Thursday night footy. I think it spreads the games out. It lets you be able to enjoy games a little bit more, and especially maybe even a little bit selfishly for myself as a podcaster, I have to kind of watch most of these. So I kind of like having them spread out so I have more time to be able to kind of keep track of them. So I'm 100% with you guys on that one. So there are only 10 rounds left in the season. This is always one of my favorite ones because there's still so much footy, but yet it's dwindling. And it just shows you how fast the season goes. So with 10 rounds left, what team do you feel is going to be a team you have to watch that is not yours? So Kyle, not Gold Coast, PJ, not Fremantle, and for yours truly, not Sydney. So Kyle, will go with you. What's a team you're gonna have to watch over these last 10 rounds that is not Gold Coast?
As much as I hate to say it, the Brisbane Lions. Um, they underperformed first half of the year, first third of the year. They're storming back. I think they still have a chance to win it all. Obviously they're pretty low down the standings still at the moment. What are they at? 10th place. But at the same time, they still have a bunch of their core from last year. They're still above 500 club at the moment. And yeah, overall, I think Brisbane, they're always tough. This year, I don't think is any exception. I think they're going to come roaring back.
Okay, PJ.
I mean, he stole mine, so I'll take my backup. I'm actually gonna go with Bulldogs here. Not because I think that they're gonna go on and be an amazing team, but just because their inconsistency is actually what makes them so interesting. I was talking to some of my friends, some of my other Frio friends the other day, and one of them labeled them like the bipolar team of the competition, which I thought that was
It's
a pretty apt
very
description.
true.
I mean, they destroyed us, and they've had some terrible results, and they've had some great results. I think they have a really good upside, and they kind of remind me of, every year when I'm making my March Madness bracket and I'm looking for my dark horse team, I try to pick that team who's a little consistent that has those great results, right? And I think that if they make finals, which who knows if they will, that they could actually make a run. No means saying that they'll even go to the grand final, but I could, honest to God, see them winning a round or two in the finals. So for me, because of their inconsistency and their high ceiling after Brisbane, they're my team to watch.
Awesome, awesome. And for me, it's a team that's similar, but they've started to find form, and that's Hawthorn. For me, it's
Yes.
Hawthorn because they are in fuego right now. In fact, I think the buy for them came at the worst possible time because they were playing magnificent footy going in. They had won 5 of the 6 of their last 7. They were starting to play well. I know they're outside the finals. Looking at the ladder right now, they're sitting 13th, but they're only a game behind Port Adelaide for last place. I mean, it is going to be so crazy watching this Hawks team because they're starting to find what I think a lot of people expected them under Sam Mitchell. They're getting healthy. They're starting to get performances from Jai Newcomb, Warple, Day is healthy. CJ Giath is now back. You're seeing Gunston kind of getting some of that renewed energy because the youngsters like Jack Ginnivan around him are playing really, really well. Frost and Sicily back in the back aren't having their brain fades that occasionally they'll have. So Hawthorne's my team that I'm keeping an eye on it. And for anybody that knows Sydney and Hawthorne's rivalry over the 2000 between 2012 to 2016, as many times as they butted heads, I can't not go with Hawthorne because they're going to be a team that they're going to be watch worthy every time they play because they're going to be in it up to their eyeballs. Cannot wait for them. So, as I tell most people, I always when I get co-hosts on, I like to have them be able to talk about their team a little bit. So I have a Gold Coast fan and a Fremantle fan. So I thought let's ask a question about each of their clubs to them. So PJ, we'll start with you. Frio get the big win this week. Sorry, Kyle. Um, are you expecting? I hate to do this, but are you expecting finals now that you're sitting there, you're in a final spot right now, sitting in fifth, healthy percentage of 112, or are you tempering expectations? There's still several games to go, including a tough one this week, having to go to the SCG.
I mean, my head tells me yes, my heart tells me no. I mean, so many times over, I mean, I've been a Frio fan since I think 2017, and so many times over the years I've been like, okay, it's time to get going, get some finals action, and it falls apart. They have the pieces, like you said, they have a good percentage. They've had some some bad losses, but they've had some good wins as well, particularly
Mhm.
this last week. I do think our next game coming up, obviously is going to be a big, indicator of how we're going to look. I don't expect us to win, but if we can put a good performance in, keep the loss to under 20, we could always pull out the win, but keep a loss to under 20, under 10, that would be good. I'm not expecting finals this year, but I am hoping for finals, and that's the way I'll word it.
Not a bad thing. And I'll say this, if the game between Fremantle is anything like the last time, Frio's
Yes.
in with a shout because I think if
Yes.
they just kick straight, that's a much different game. The
Yes.
score line
Yes.
kind of it flattered Sydney as much as they did really well, but if Fremantle kicks straight a little bit, that's a much different game. So I'll tell you that as a Swans fan, this is a little bit terrifying because you get a second game. There's totally different circumstances. The only issue I see for Fremantle is that when they hit the road, sometimes coming east, sometimes I don't know if it's the jet lag or what, but sometimes they don't have their best performance. I'll be fascinated what your tip is and your thoughts on that one. So we'll go to you, Kyle. And I never like going negative on this, but I just want to hear what you think as the Gold Coast fan on this one. Is what do you think is keeping the Suns from finding their best form? Because again, as we see, it seems like they leave the borders of Queen. They leave the hallowed grounds of their home stadium, and they just can't find a way to win.
I think they're young. And I like Doggo Coast fans, probably all six of them, let's be honest. But um
I
to
think there's
Gold
a few
Coast
more
fans,
than six. I mean, they've sold out games before. I think there's a few more than
and
six.
they need to sell out more. I mean, as someone from Cincinnati, Gold Coast, please, I can't go to your team's games. Please go. But on a serious note, I think they're young. I think they've probably maybe a little overperformed this first half of the year, and they just need that few extra players to make a deep run. Kind of looking forward, obviously, Collingwood this weekend. It's at home. They've done well at home. Maybe hopefully Gold Coast could surprise me. Collingwood, they are who they are. They can occasionally slip up and have kind of that loss that you wouldn't have expected. Then I'll put it this way: everything really comes down to in 2 weeks against North Melbourne Kangaroos, because if they can't beat North Melbourne in North Melbourne, they're not going to win on the road and they can't make the finals. So that is, to me, is the important game. Yeah, it'd be great if we could beat Collingwood, but even if we can't, we have to beat North Melbourne, or it's probably gonna be a lost season, unfortunately.
And if North continues the way they're going, that's becoming more and more of a difficult game as the weeks go on. If they continue up their form the way they're going. So, all right, fellas, we're gonna have some fun. I kind of take over the podcast just a little bit over this next couple of sections. I do what I call the team of the week, and I kind of go through some stats. I watch the games, and I put together an 18 a man side plus 4 on the bench. And what I do is I kind of take best performances. My criteria is usually I like putting a little more emphasis on scoreboard impact. So goals and score involvements tend to be a little bit more of the reason why players make it. So you're going to hear a lot of names really quickly. So we'll go through it. We'll start in the defense since as a coach, we always start defense wins championships. On the fullback lines, he's Carlton's Lockie Cowan, Melbourne's Trent Rivers, and Essendon's Jaden Laverde. My literally my note section has completely the wrong letter, so I'll fix that. All right. Halfback line sees North Melbourne's Harry Sheasel, Carlton's Nick Newman, and Essendon's Nick Martin. When we go to the center with the ruckman, we have big Oscar McInerney of the Brisbane Lions. Out on the wings, we see Cal Ward of the GWS Giants and Sydney's Errol Goulden. In the guts, in the center, we see Port Adelaide's Zach Butters, Sydney's Chad Warner, and Fremantle's Hayden Young. On the forward line and the half forward line, see Essendon's Jake Stringer, Brisbane's Joe Danaher, and Geelong's Jeremy Cameron. The full forward line, we see Brisbane's Eric Hipwood, Carlton's Charlie Curnow, and North Melbourne's Cam Zerha. On the bench, I have one from each defender, ruck, midfield, and forward. My defender is Sam Flanders of the Gold Coast Suns. My ruck is Tom DeConing of the Carlton Blues. My midfielder is Sam Walsh of the Carlton Blues. And my forward from the West Coast Eagles, Jake Waterman. So I know that's a lot of names really, really quickly. Really quick, guys, your thoughts on Team of the Week?
I would include Matty Rao, midfield ruck area. I mean, yeah, I'm biased, but I mean I think you take him out of Gold Coast's roster and they win 4 or 5 games this year so far. He's definitely made the difference, at least in the home opener. I mean, he played phenomenal. I think 30 some disposals. I don't even know.
Yeah, he had 12 or 13 and just clearances just himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where my midfield tends to be where a lot of people have the discussion point because it really is about, can you have a midfielder that goes forward to kick goals? Like Chad Warner kicks 2 goals, Hayden Young kicks 3 goals in this one, and I can't right off the top of my head. And Zach Butters kicks 2 goals for Port Adelaide. So that's kind of the reason why those guys are there. So your thoughts, PJ?
I'm glad you included Hayden Young because that was the point I was going to bring up. I thought you might leave him out, and then I was going to be like, "Well, he
He
scored 3
kicked
goals.
3 goals.
You got to put him in, right?"
My question was, do I put him as a forward? Does I put him as a forward, which then he most likely doesn't get in, but he was playing enough midfield that I can chuck him into the guts in the midfield because there wasn't a midfielder that kicked more than 2. So besides him at 3, so yeah, so I was gonna get him in for sure. I know it was kind of a fun round because there was a lot of there was a couple of games that when you get blowout losses, you see the big goals. 5 goals for Hipwood, 4 goals for Danaher. Zerha kicked 4, so it's one of those. Sometimes the goal kickers can kind of help me deduce who comes out of that really easily because I just go with the 6 highest guys that kick the most goals and then just kind of chuck them into spots on that one. So, and then I do power rankings, which is an homage to the original part of the podcast, the fourth and long part of the original part of the podcast. But I do a what have you done for me lately? This is the last 5 rounds, so it's all on form. Buys Teams that have buys are not punished unless the team below them had like a super good game. So, top 5 right now, as of the last 5 rounds, sees number 5, the Collingwood Magpies, number 4, the Brisbane Lions, number 3, the Hawthorn Hawks, number 2, Carlton Blues, and at 1, the Sydney Swans. So, pretty self-explanatory. Brisbane, Carlton, Sydney all get wins. Collingwood, Hawthorn both had bye weeks. Can't really throw anybody in. So relatively, it's exactly the same as last week. So, gentlemen, we've got through it. Let's get to what I think is the fun part of the podcast, and that is tipping. We have 9 games to go through. I know we're early on in the week, injury reports still to come out, everything like that, but I want to have some fun. Let's tip and see how we do in the next round. We will jump up to the GABA as we see the Brisbane Lions v the Melbourne Demons up at the GABA. PJ, we'll start with you. Brisbane, Melbourne, who do you like in this one? As I catch you in
It's 10.
mid-drink.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
All good. 10v9 should be a great game. For me, it's got to be Brisbane. Like you said, inform. There's a reason they're high on the power rankings. I mean, some of their fans may even ask to be even higher with how good that win last week was. But for me, it's got to be Brisbane. Could be close, but got to be Brisbane.
All right, Kyle, your thoughts?
I'll second that. I think Brisbane, especially at home, takes care of business. Melbourne, FC, they're good, but at the same time, they're about same in the standings. Obviously, Melbourne's 8-6, Brisbane 7-6, but Brisbane obviously had the bye. So they're close competition. I think it will probably be a pretty competitive game, but being in Brisbane, I'm gonna give the nod to Brisbane Lions as well.
Yeah, Brisbane really good at home, coming up against a Melbourne team that I think the loss of Petrarca will finally kind of rear its ugly head in this one. I like the Lions in this one, but I still think it's a cracker. These two always play really good games when they lock horns, so cannot wait for this one. A very intriguing one at Marvel Stadium is North Melbourne hosts the Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium. Kyle, who do you like in this one?
Western Bulldogs. I think North Melbourne will probably make it competitive in the first half, but I think Western Bulldogs just going to prove to be too strong of an opponent. And I don't think it's too controversial of an opinion to say, considering North Melbourne. I mean, they've only won one game. Of course, they won 2 weeks ago, but let's be honest, two is a trend. One win isn't a trend. It's a
Mhm.
fluke. And if you play enough pro games, you're eventually hopefully going to win one. Unless you're the Browns. But other than that, you're not. It is what it is. North Melbourne, I think they still are the weakest team in the league, and yeah, I'll give that to North Melbourne, especially considering there's no heavy favorite for home field advantage.
All right, PJ?
Yeah, as much as I would love to say the Roos here and be able to have that underdog pick, I just can't. I mean, 4 points on the season says most of it for me. This could be a good opportunity for them, right? They're playing someone that's currently below the eight. They do, while only the one win, a little bit more quote unquote form for them. But I think it's got to be the doggies here. I mean, it's a terrible season for them. They're getting better, but still, I don't think there's enough there yet for me to say that they're going to win this game.
Tipping the doggies, but I think North gives a mighty crack on this one. Will not shock me if the Roos pull an upset here. Will not shock me a bit because doggies coming off a bye, North in really good form despite the losses. This could be that perfect storm for an upset. Gonna tip doggies. Think Roos are in it with a crack. Well, head up to the SCG as Fremantle make the long flight across country as Sydney hosts the Fremantle Dockers. I will go first in this one. I will tip Sydney, but again, as I've said the last couple of rounds, this is a scary matchup. The Dockers, the last time, I think played really, really well. In fact, in some situations, their goal kicking is the reason they lost that game, not because Sydney outplayed them. I think Sydney win this one. Hometown cooking. Sometimes Fremantle, when they leave the WA, sometimes have a little bit of a letdown. Sydney win this one, but I think this is a cracking game. I think Fremantle plays much, much closer. I think this comes down to late in the fourth quarter on this one. Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Sydney's the better team. Obviously, they're at home, and after the loss this past weekend, I just want to see Frio lose.
Wow, PJ.
I mean, for me, as much as I would love to say Frio, and as much as I could see the situation being right for them to compete, I've got to put the Swans in for this one. Like again, would not be surprised at all if Rio win. But I honestly think it's going to be the travel. I think Rio's chance to beat them is at home. If that was going to happen, that was going to happen. And but yeah, I'm going to have to take Sydney on this. Maybe only by 7, but I think they'll. I think there's too much quality, and I have a feeling that Rio's goal kicking issues might resurface.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting for sure. That's going to be a cracking one on there. We jump up to Gold Coast at People First Stadium as Kyle's beloved Gold Coast Suns take on the Collingwood Magpies as the Pies Army flies north to a rocking crowd up at People's First Stadium. I'm fascinated, Kyle. Can your boys get it done, or are you a little worried the Pies find a way to end the undefeated streak at home?
I'm going either way on this. Obviously, I'd like to see them get the win at home. I think, unfortunately, I think they're probably going to lose a close one here. Collingwood, very good team. Mason Cox, American, gotta love him. I don't see the Gold Coast having quite the firepower. I think it'll be close, and I think they'll win on the road against North Melbourne next week, and keep that 500 record going into the last 7 games. But I'll give Collingwood the narrow victory. But if Gold Coast pulls the upset, I would not be surprised on this.
Okay, PJ, your thoughts?
I'm actually going to take Gold Coast on this one. I'm going to let this be like my upset pick of the
Huh.
week. As much as I'd like to stick it to Cal for wanting my team to lose. I do genuinely think that Gold Coast will win. Again, would not be surprised at all if they lose. And if they end up losing by 20, I don't want people in my DMs yelling at me like, "How could you pick them?" Because it would make sense for them to lose, but they've been so good at home, and there are a lot of question marks with this team, but they've just been so good at home, and they've had good results at home that will mirror this game, and I honestly think they'll win.
I'm one of those. I'm like directly in between you two. I'm gonna tip Gold Coast. I'm gonna tip Collingwood in this one. But I'm fully with you. I'm fully with you, PJ. Like Gold Coast has played super well at home. It'll be interesting to see how this Collingwood team handles a little bit more tropical climate when it comes to it. Gold Coast plays that particular stadium very well. But this is a Collingwood side. They're well drilled. They are getting healthier. I think Pendlebury should be back this week, potentially for DeGoey, but I don't think DeGoey will make it back. Check could potentially be back. Collingwood's starting to get healthy, which could be a danger for the rest of the competition, as good as they already are, to get some of their superstars back. Going to tip Collingwood, but will not shock me if Gold Coast pull this off because they have played very well at home, and Collingwood still is not 100% healthy. So that's going to be a fun one up at the Gold Coast. We jump over to an interesting one. I think two teams that really need a win. Adelaide Oval, as the Adelaide Crows host the GWS Giants. PJ, your thoughts on this one? Because I think both teams really need this win. If the Crows want to have any chance of finals, they need to win this, and GWS need to find some form.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not really sure who I'm going to take on this one. I could go either way, honestly. I have a slight personal preference for GWS, so I'll take GWS. Both teams do really need form though, and I honestly think for me, for this game, it's honestly less about who I think is going to win and more of whoever does. They are both coming off of losses, I think. Um, but whoever does win this game, I think they're going to team that carries further. So I think this should be a close game. I think that will give them enough confidence to carry further.
All right, Kyle,
But
your
I will
thoughts on
go.
this?
I'm not even going to try to call it because I think it's going to be so close.
Your thoughts on this one, Kyle?
Adelaide versus Canberra. Got it that time. I think this is going to be the surprise one. I think the Crows are going to win, and I think they're going to win by at least 10, 15, maybe 20 points. Obviously, Greater Western Sydney traveling on the road. It's any team traveling on the road. It's already at disadvantage. GWS has looked shaky the past few weeks. And I just think Adelaide is kind of do or die for them at this point. I don't know if they crack the grand finals, probably won't. But I still think Adelaide Oval at home, big game, must win. I think Adelaide get it done.
This is a fun one for me. I got several Crows fans and several Giants fans, and I'm always sitting in between on this one. I'm gonna tip the Giants only because I think the Crows just cannot figure out what they want to be. Do they want to bottom out and get a better draft pick, or do they want to win and try to save some pride? And I worry that they're gonna 50-50 between those two. And GWS, I don't think they played a horrible game against Sydney. I think they just ran into a buzzsaw at just the right time. The Giants, I think, are playing better football. I think they've got more talent in just the right places that they need it. Or were they missing Sam Taylor because of his ruptured testicle? Maybe. And did that change it? No, I don't think Sam Taylor playing in that game against Sydney would have changed it that much. I'm going to tip the Giants in this one. Think it's still close. I think the Crows fight off for some pride in this one, which may give them that opportunity, but I think the Giants just a little bit too good. Class Tom Green. I think Toby Green finally gets out of his funk, and I think he kicks four in this one and helps lead his troops to the 4 points. A fun one at the MCG as Geelong take on Essendon in this one. I'm going to go right off the top of the bat. I think the Tommy Hawkins injury, I think, only continues to exacerbate the issues with the Cats. I'm going to tip the Dons. I know the Dons are still shaky a little bit. They still haven't 100% convinced me after kind of letting West Coast stay in that game a little bit too much. But I think the injuries at Gold Coast, the way the Essendon fans are getting up and about, a bigger stadium MCG means more Essendon fans can get there. I'm going to tip the Dons in this one. So PJ, your thoughts, Geelong, Essendon.
Yeah, give me the Bombers. For pretty much the same reasons you listed, injuries, fans. I will say though, their game last week against West Coast gave me reasons to think that they would lose this week, but I honestly think just having that win will give them enough confidence to push forward for this week. Honestly, had it been most other teams in the competition, probably would have lost. They did not look that good. But I do think, I mean, they both lost to Carlton recently, I think.
Mhm.
Though the Cats loss was a good bit worse. Um, but yeah, give me the Bombers. Injuries, home, recent win, but we'll be close.
All right. Kyle, your thoughts.
I'll complete the trifecta. I think Essendon is going to get the win as well. Obviously, not a big road home field advantage on this one, but I think Essendon, they're a higher caliber team. Obviously, Geelong's suffering several injuries. And I think Essendon, I think they're a top four team this year. And I think they're going to show it.
Definitely going to be fun. That's going to be fun. If Tommy Hawkins were healthy, I'd lean a little bit more towards Geelong, but no Tommy Hawkins. Cameron's most likely going to get the best defender. They haven't been 100% consistent with a full forward when Hawkins hasn't played this year. Just, I think it's a recipe for disaster against an Essendon team that I think is humming at just the right time. A very fun one on this one. Can Port Adelaide right the ship as they head over to Marvel Stadium to face a Saints team that a lot of people are still trying to figure out what the hell is going on in Saints land? Kyle, we'll start with you. Saints, Port Adelaide. Who comes out the victor in this one?
I'm going to give Saints narrow victory, games at home. And, I don't think the Saints are going to win this game. I think the Power are going to lose this game. The Power, they're on a skid. They don't know which way is up. They were doing so well at the start of the year, and they're falling back down to earth. This one, I think, once again, it'll probably be pretty close, but I think the Saints will probably get the narrow victory here. But this one could honestly go either way. But once again, I don't think it's up to the Saints. The Saints are who they are. I'd say they're a bottom third team, but a higher caliber bottom third team. I think it all depends upon, is Port Adelaide going to show up the way that they know how to play? Or are they going to lay an egg again like they have the past week or two?
Mm-hmm. TJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. Looking at their both of their recent results, looking at their players. For me, I'm going to take Port, just because I think they've had some recent bad losses, but I think last week was just so bad that it's kind of like a reset moment for them, and honestly could end up helping them a little bit in the long run. I'm going to take Port. I think they're going to come out angry, and I think if they can keep the basics together. I'm going to take them probably by 11.
If I'm a Saints fan right now, I am cussing Brisbane out so bad right
Yes.
now
Yes.
because you literally are sending us a very angry Port Adelaide team, and when
Yes.
they're angry and they are
Yes.
inspired, they can really come out. And again, this is a Saints team that has not been convincing. They have not been solid. They're very inconsistent. And damn it, Ross Lyon, when you have runners, use them. So Port
Yes.
Adelaide on this
Yes.
one for me. I think Port Adelaide come out, and I think they put a whooping potentially on St. Kilda if St. Kilda does not try to fire back on this one. MCG, oh boy, not a fun one on this one as Richmond take on the Carlton Blues. Carlton, you are licking your chops on this one because you could have yourself a field day against a Richmond team that now without Lynch again, another hamstring injury. This team cannot stay healthy. I think this is Blues, and this could be Blues big. So, PJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say, if I was a Blues fan, I mean, I would be sitting on watching this game. I got popcorn, I got a snack, I'm ready to go because this one could be really fun for Blues fans. They've got good form, and Richmond are just a mess this season. I think they're going to talk about this game in that city for a couple of years. I think this is going to be Blues big, at least by 50.
Yep. Kyle, your thoughts?
Well, if North Melbourne wants first overall draft pick, obviously they want Richmond to stay competitive because this might blow out Richmond's point differential on the year. Yeah, I think you two summed it up perfectly. I think Carlton is going to stomp Richmond, and it's not so much Richmond's fault. I mean, they've gotten a lot of injuries. They don't have it. Going into the year, it was suspected that it would be a rebuilding year, and God, has it been a rebuilding year for them. So yeah, I'll concur what you two have said. I think Carlton goes and takes care of business.
Way too many injuries in places that they can't afford them. And the last one out at Optus Stadium, a fun one, is the West Coast Eagles have Harley Reid come back, and they are greeted by an Enfuego Hawthorne Hawks team coming off a bye. PJ, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, like I think Hawthorn are going to be an interesting team to watch for the rest of the competition. And honestly, a couple I think month, maybe 2 months ago, there wasn't too much separating these two teams on the ladder. But it has been these past 4 games for both. West Coast straight 4 straight losses, Hawthorn 4 straight wins. Hawthorn just have form. They're 16, I think 16 points up simply because of these last couple of rounds. And so because of that, I'm going to take Hawthorn. I just think they're too hot.
All right, Kyle, your thoughts?
I'll second that, although I think it will be a pretty closely contested match. Obviously, it's in Perth. Uh, West Coast Eagles have fans, they're always there. So I think it will still be pretty loud and ruckus, but ultimately, as you can look at trends, West Coast Eagles lost the past, 3-4 games. Hawthorne's won the past 4 games. So yeah, I'm gonna take Hawthorne as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you both. Hawthorne in this one, but West Coast is gonna push Hawthorne. This will be, can Hawthorne keep the rust from the week off? That'll be the biggest thing because this is a West Coast team that on their day are playing well. Oscar Allen will be playing his second game. I think he started to kind of find what he has been previous weeks before. Harley Reid steps back in, and the magic that sometimes can be Harley Reid, but I think the depth of talent that Hawthorne has, I think it's just going to be a little bit too much on that one. So Hawks for me. Gentlemen, that is it. That is all 9 games tipped, and that is going to do it for our podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you two again. Love talking footy with fellow Americans, and as somebody who coaches a team over here, I appreciate what you guys are doing at the University of Cincinnati. I wish you nothing but the best. Good luck the rest of the season. Hopefully recruiting continues to keep going well, and hopefully maybe we can invite you guys out to Des Moines sometime and maybe have a crack at a game with the Roosters and maybe the University of Cincinnati sometime very, very soon. So Kyle, PJ, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. Hey, go out and have a practice at University of Iowa. See what that can yield. Always worth a shot.
All right, PJ.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Always good to talk footy and always good to just get our message out there, try to get more college teams up.
Always. I 100% agree with you on that one. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, more footy coverage, VFL, Sandful, and Waffle shows still to come. We are hitting finals footy in each of the women's competitions. VFL show still to come, hopefully later on this week. That'll do it for another episode of Donnie's Disposals. We'll be back again very, very soon.